Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine on the BetQL Network.
Appreciate Arnold Almighty Allen joining us on Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin and Jake Noaker. I am the sports machine, Sean Levine. BT, Arnold Allen is one of those guys where, some guys talk with their mouth and some guys talk with their fist. Arnold Allen, not one to talk a lot of smack. However, he does have the second longest winning streak in the promotion. He's a guy that isn't necessarily going to give you a one-liner, but he might just knock your ass out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, he's all business going into this week. Look, you have to appreciate some guys, they don't want to fake it. They're just all about it. A lot of people, this is a martial art to them, and they don't feel like they have to add anything to it. And it's going to be fascinating to see because, he's taking on a guy who's one of the best to ever do it in this division and in the sport. But look, he may not be much with the one-liners. It doesn't mean he can't make for an exciting fight. This really seems like it's going to shape up to be a great one.
It does feel like that's become such a big part of the sport that maybe it's a little refreshing. Like, can you imagine a guy like Luke Rockhold not trying to be funny or to be charismatic, just to be himself, and just go out there and fight? Who knows? Speaking of knockouts, Jake Paul, Nate Diaz, we've been talking about it for a while. I think once Jake Paul lost to Tommy Fury, it took away a lot of the luster. Like, he's not undefeated anymore, so it's not quite as fun of a story. I thought the Nate Diaz thing was dead in the water after that. I figured Nate wanted to take him out, be the first one to beat him, but once that already happened, the payday is not going to be quite as big, not as many eyeballs, not as many people talking about it. But here we are. Looks like it's official for August. Does that wet your whistle at all?
I don't know, man. Like, not really.
Okay.
When you guys sent me the poster in the group chat during the week, and I was like, predictable, but it just doesn't have the same juice. I mean, honestly, dude, I've been pretty, not sick. Sick's the wrong word of the Jake Paul thing, but it's just like, I'm there, but I'm not like, oh.
You're annoyed. You're acting annoyed. You're acting like when one of your kids comes in during the radio show. You
kind of.
You want to swat them away.
I'm like, as a and you guys know, I'm a big boxing fan, and to see, this be considered boxing, it's like, all right, because I mean, I will say, look, Jake Paul is a lot better than we all thought that he was, but
Sure.
He's also not good. He's not a good boxer, which isn't really supposed to be the point. So, to go see Jake Paul try and hug and hit that overhand right and split decisions, it's not super exciting for me. Great for Nate. I'm happy that Nate's going to get a lot of money. That's awesome for for Nate for getting to walk away. Because you know what? We're seeing as it's going on with Francis right now, doesn't really have a landing spot. So that sucks. The heavyweight champion should be, being able to get the bag somewhere. Nate is. So that's great. I'm happy for Nate Diaz. If Nate Diaz is the one who can finally knock out Jake Paul, trust me, I'll be watching that night. But if you're telling me, can't wait, because I don't know if he will. And I guess that's a credit to Jake Paul that I don't think he's just going to get murked by Nate Diaz. But yeah, who cares? If Jake Paul beats him, not surprised. He beat another over the hill UFC guy. If he loses by decision, all right, we've seen that now. We've seen him in close fights. The only thing that makes it exciting now is if one gets knocked out or the other gets knocked out. So I just, it's just the novelty has worn off for me a little bit, dude.
I don't want to see it happen because I'm a huge Nate Diaz fan, but there'd be something to the optics of seeing him get knocked out by Jake Paul, the same way that when he knocked out Woodley or Ben Askren, that would be, whoa, I can't believe that happened. And in the case of Nate Diaz, not really a knockout artist per se, more of a punches and bunches guy, but definitely I would say the best boxer, maybe outside of Tommy Fury, you have to say. I mean, Nate Diaz is a legitimate boxer. I would say that's his best skill set in the UFC. And maybe it's BJJ.
I would say, I mean, we're going with age there, right? Because, Anderson Silva actually boxed, I think that, he boxed Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Now, Nate Diaz is trained with Andre Ward. He's trained with legitimate boxers.
And been doing it forever.
Yeah, been doing it forever. So maybe but he's got a bit of a brawler's style to this thing. I mean, hell, over under until on the rounds until he's cut, because I'm gonna go 1.5 because he's got so much scar tissue built up. I think if Jake Paul just goes and breathes on him, it's gonna be cut.
Bigger
I
gloves,
want whatever that action is. You let me know. Gloves. I feel like if you're just in his vicinity, it just cuts open. Like it just happens. If you look at Nate Diaz's scar tissue, it opens up.
Him and his brother, but that's what makes him so much fun to watch. With Brendan Tobin, I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. All right, so you call that fake boxing. We're a week away from what I think you would consider real boxing. What's your early thoughts on Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia?
My early lean is Tank. I think that he's going to get this one done. Speaking to a lot of boxers in the lead up to this, I feel like most people are leaning Tank because it's a couple of things. I think people believe in just the well-roundedness of Tank's boxing skill set, and they think that Ryan Garcia is a bit of a one-trick pony. But look, he does have the size advantage if he does cut weight the right way. Which I think he will. Even though this is a hard weight for Ryan to make, and he's not going to end up having his career here, it's still doable for him. 136 is not bad, even with the hydration clause. It's just a case of what is it going to take for him to land that sweet left hand, that sweet hook. But we've said, we've covered a lot of Tank's fights. We know that he's a very slow starter. He leaves you that window for yourself to get going. So if Ryan can get to a spot where he gets something early to really have Gervonta Davis thinking about it and respecting it, then maybe he's got a shot. But I just think that, Gervonta's speed is a little bit underrated. His just pure boxing skill is a little bit underrated. But he's another one. As long as the discipline's in the right spot and he's had his head on straight, which I think he will for this one, I just think that he's got more ways to win the fight than Ryan does.
And I agree. I think it's more important for King Rai to get off to a good start in those early rounds than Tank Davis. Because we've seen Gervonta Davis lose rounds early and then end up outpointing his opponent at the end, winning those last five out of the last 6 rounds, whatever it is. So I'm with you there. I think that if Ryan Garcia is going to somehow win that fight, especially by decision, right? If nobody's going to knock out the other dude, Garcia's got to start racking up some rounds early on in that fight. All right, we've got that one. Now let's talk about some fights that we don't have anymore. Charles Oliveira is out of UFC 288 versus Beneil Dariush. Dubronx has an injury. That sucks because I think that there was a chance whoever won that fight was going to fight for the belt next. Too bad we lose that one. That was going to be a banger.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to say one more thing before we move on to this because I just clicked on the odds, which I don't even know if that's right. Maybe Jake can check on this. I'm seeing Gervonta Davis by decision at plus 600. I mean, if that's the case, or you see anything in the vicinity of that anywhere, I don't know how you don't go run to that right now.
What are you seeing Ryan Garcia by decision? Because if you ask me, if you said
plus 800,
right, really?
Yeah.
So they think somebody's getting knocked out in this fight. When I say they, BetMGM, Las Vegas, the odds makers.
I don't know.
I don't know either. If you would before you told me that, if you would have said how does this fight finish, I would say it goes to the cards. What say you?
Yeah, I do too. So that's
get in where you fit in. Get in now.
All right. I'm just letting everybody know. Anyway, Beneil Dariush versus Charles Oliveira. Super bummed about that news. That was a great fight. Bummed for Charles Oliveira and for Beneil Dariush because Beneil's looking for kind of that signature cherry on top to get himself to the title shot. It seems like after the momentum last week, maybe we're moving a little bit towards a Gaethje Poirier rematch. So I think whoever wins that fight may move into the lead spot for getting to Islam. But maybe Beneil gets the benefit that Islam did, and he gets a late opponent switch and does something impressive, and then he gets to go fight for the title. So, hey, look, that matchup was supposed to happen. So I don't feel like it's not fair that Islam was able to get a late replacement and then waltz his way to the title shot, and not Beneil. But even still, that was going to be an awesome fight. I'm bummed that Charles isn't going to be fighting.
I'll stop with all this fair stuff. It's the UFC. We know how it works. And Beneil
That doesn't.
Dariush,
The F doesn't stand for fair.
no, it does not stand for fair. And Beneil Dariush has been completely screwed by this promotion the same way that Leon has for a long time, where he's a great fighter. It's just he's maybe not as interesting as some of these other guys. Like when it comes to his fists and his kicks and his elbows and his BJJ and his boxing, he's just as good as these guys. When it comes to the skills behind the microphone, not necessarily. So I don't know, man. I think they make Beneil work his way back to Islam, even though he definitely deserves a shot.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. He's kind of one of those guys, like we talk about, like, you know, not necessarily the most charismatic guy, although he's not like a bore on the mic, but you know, is needing of something to really stand out in the division. I think that his fights have gotten more exciting. He's got some really good wins to rack up. So hopefully he's got another one to get there so he can get to that match, because I think we all will say that matchup is a really, really fun title fight if they can get to it.
Well, we bring UFC fighters on pretty much every single show. In fact, this episode you can hear from both Arnold Almighty Allen and Max Blessed Holloway. Who's your favorite interview? Just give me a name that we've done so far since we've been doing this show. Which one's your favorite?
Oh, wow. Well, my favorite, because I like the Russians, is I like the Volkov interview, Alexander Volkov with his translator, and them inviting us to go ice diving. That was really fun. I enjoyed that immensely.
Mine was Bryce Mitchell when he talked about and wrestling his bull twister and all that stuff. Bryce Mitchell might be wrestling his bull because JSP Jonathan Pierce is out of his fight. Bryce Mitchell last time out didn't look great. Let's get an opponent for our guy, because next time he's back in the octagon, I want to see him get a win.
Yeah, and he had the same thing happen to him the last time around, where he had a late opponent switch, and he said, like, look, I need to fight. I need the money. Guy's got a farm to raise, people. So he didn't, he ended up getting Ilya Taporia. Tough matchup for him. He knew it. Also said that he wasn't, quite physically up to it. So, yeah, that's a huge bummer for Bryce, because he's trying to get in there. Before that, he was undefeated going into the Taporia fight, but wasn't the guy that he was expecting. So that's a bummer to get that type of news for him.
Renato Moicano is also out of his fight against Arman Sarukian. Rough week, man. Speaking of I'm out, Alex Pereira loses, and then he says, I'm out. Not of the UFC, but I'm out of the weight class, moving up to 205. Let's be honest. He's huge. I mean, it looked like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. You were there watching it in Miami. I was watching it in Kansas City from my house, talking about last week's main event, Adesanya versus Alex Pereira, and it looked like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Izzy's already a slender guy for the weight class, but he looked tiny in there. I think this is a smart move for Pereira for a couple of reasons. One, you can always get – this Izzy fight's going to be there, right? If we want to see it again next week, next year, 2 years, whatever weight class, hell, whatever sport, that fight's going to be there. Moving up as a naturally heavy guy makes all the sense in the world for Poatan.
Agreed. And I think that one of the things with rematches and doing fights over is timing is a big thing. There's no obligation to always keep running things back right away. Usually you do immediate rematch, and then, like we saw with Volkanovski and Max Holloway, have a little time between, and it'll make that trilogy all the more exciting in the buildup. A lot of fun matchups for him at 205. You think about just him versus Jamal Hill. What a fun matchup that is. You think about him versus Yuri. So there's some really fun fights for him. Now, he did just get knocked out cold by a middleweight. So he's now maybe not having to cut all that weight. Maybe he'll be able to take the punches a little bit better, or he's going to have to learn to deal with even more powerful strikes and seeing how that is. But I agree. I think it's the right thing to let this one breathe a little bit. And the one thing you got to say about Izzy is he already seems like he's got his eye set on whoever is next soon. And, he kind of hinted at it the press conference, whether it's Dricus du Plessis or if it's Hamzat or even if it's Bo Nickel. Bo Nickel, you see that video of Bo Nickel says, I'm coming for you. So there are still some fun contenders this story is as good as it's gotten right now, right? Like, he was 0-3, this long-reigning champion, and he got back. He got his payback. You don't need to go run that back right now. You can let some other stuff happen, and then eventually maybe Izzy takes another crack at 205 if Pereira is able to become the champion. But I'm glad that they're going to let it cool on ice for a little bit and maybe get some other fun contenders in there.
Let's talk about Khamzat Chimaev getting his shot at the belt versus Adesanya coming up a little bit later on in the show. Leon Edwards is targeting October for his date with Colby Covington. That's it for this week's news and notes. Coming up next, we continue the fight talk. You're locked into the BetQL Network.